Right, and now is a time when we prepare to enter into our meditation. And as we go into the meditation today, I invite you to bring a meaningful word or a meaningful phrase to your mind. And just hold it there, and as we go through the meditation, I'll direct you as to when and how to repeat that phrase or that word. So let's now begin our meditation. So I invite you to just close your eyes or keep them open if you feel comfortable, but just gaze on one small area, just a gentle gaze. And just start by relaxing each muscle in your body. Allowing thoughts to come to mind and just welcoming them. And accepting those, but just focusing your attention back to the body. Allowing your muscles to become loose and relaxed, starting with your feet and your ankles. Your legs and your hips. Your torso and your shoulders. Arms and hand. And your face and your head. Just feeling your entire body just becoming loose and relaxed. Now I invite you to turn your attention to your breathing. Just noticing each breath without trying to change your breath in any way, just simply allowing it to be. Just observing. Still allowing those thoughts to arise, and still just acknowledging them and letting them go. Returning your attention to your breathing. Focusing on your breathing, just letting thoughts go as you breathe gently in and breathe gently out. Now I ask you to bring to mind that meaningful word or phrase that you selected. And just silently repeating this word or phrase in your mind as you exhale the breath. Each time you breathe out, saying your word or your phrase. And as your thoughts begin to wander, just gently bring your attention again to repeating your meaningful thought or phrase with each out breath. And as we enter into our period of silence, I invite you to just continue to focus on that word or that phrase, repeating it each time you breathe out with each out breath, allowing distracting thoughts to simply just float by as we enter into the silence. Now I invite you to begin to slowly reawaken. Still focusing on your breathing, noticing the calm, smooth breaths as you inhale and exhale. Allowing your awareness to return to your body, calm and relaxed. Noticing how your body feels, becoming aware of your surroundings. Allowing your attention to now return back to your thoughts, back to your normal conscious awareness. And I invite you to just sit quietly for a moment with your eyes gently open, just enjoying the feeling of relaxation while you gradually reawaken and bring your awareness back to this moment. And as you move through the day today, I invite you to reflect upon the experience of your meditation, remembering what it was like and how you felt and how you feel now. Free from worries about how you did in meditation. It's not a race. Knowing that whatever happened was your natural and correct response to meditation. Just wiggling your fingers and your toes, rolling your shoulders and stretching. And when you're ready, I invite you to bring your full conscious back to this space. Namaste. I want to take the jazz band home with me. I could listen to that all day. Some of my favorite. So how is everybody doing this morning? You know, as we enter the end of the book study, to me it's kind of bittersweet. Because I'm one of those types of people, I'm ready to go on to something else, but I've enjoyed it. So it's a bittersweet ending. And today I will delve a little bit into chapter 7 and 8. But that doesn't mean your groups have to end right away. You can meet an extra week or continue to take those groups on forward into the next year, just whatever you feel the most comfortable with. So as we draw the book study to a close, we've talked about the habits of the heart, and we begin to welcome rather than fear the stranger. And we've talked about how we each individually and as a congregation can shine our spiritual lights for other people to see. Now, why it's often really easy to do in a book study, when it's first and foremost on our minds each Sunday and each week in our groups, what about as time moves forward and it's not first on our minds? What about then, and how can we remember what we've learned and what we've talked about? Now, I remember we did a book study at my Dallas church whenever I was a congregant there, and I was gung-ho. I was plugged in with a group of other people on the same journey. I was in my study group. I would read each chapter every week to prepare for the discussion and just so I could be ready for the Sunday talk. And I'd be really ready to discuss it when the time came. I was feeling it and I was moving. Our Sunday talks, those kept me really plugged into it. And I was really keeping it close in my mind. And I started seeing changes in the way that I was perceiving the world and just perceiving things as we went through this study. And my vibration was rising. I was good. But suddenly the study ended. It just felt like that rug was kind of yanked out from under me. But the Sunday talks ended. The group meetings ended. And before long, I would feel my vibrations start to lower a bit. And I would imagine that can happen to most of us. But we want to prevent that from happening, right? So how do we prevent that? And how do we keep it close without falling back into possible previous habits or thoughts that we just don't want? So one of the ways that Mr. Palmer mentioned, which I really like to hear about, is to unplug. And we know how important that is, especially in today's world when we have things coming at us 24/7. And one of the ways we can do this is through really good self-care. And part of that good self-care is knowing when to retreat. Or as we say in the digital age, to completely unplug. Sounds weird, kind of like you're a robot and having to plug yourself into like a wall or something. But our book provides a quote from Joseph Campbell, who is the author of The Power of Myth. You must have a room or a certain hour or so a day where you don't know what was in the newspapers that morning. Or the news 24/7 coming at us, right? A place where you can simply experience and bring forth what you are and what you might be. So then Palmer states, as this practice deepens, we learn that becoming a monk every now and then does not mean detaching from the world, but entering more deeply into it. So often I think people view me time as something selfish. They view it as a selfish act. When in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Taking me time is not selfish, as we've so often been taught. For instance, I'm not likely going to be good to anybody else if I haven't taken care of myself. How can I be prepared to take care of other people if I haven't first taken care of myself? And this includes moments to just be free and unplugged from everything. Psalms 91 in the Bible mentions the secret place of the Most High. And spiritual teacher and author Emily Cady wrote an entire chapter dedicated to it in her book, Lessons in Truth. She said, it is a secret place because it is a place of meeting between the Christ at the center of your being and your consciousness. A hidden place into which no outside person can either induct you or enter him or herself. No one can come into it from the outside. So unplugging allows us that time that we need to just retreat into silence and to recharge our inner batteries. But it also helps us in another way too, and that is because it's within that silence that we find answers. Answers to some of those nagging, what appears to sometimes be those nagging questions in life. Now, Palmer refers to author Thomas Merton and how in 1944, Mr. Merton entered into a Trappist monastery to live as a Trappist monk. And Merton mentioned insight during his time there, and he talked about how insight into the human condition was always found within himself. Not from the outside world, but he always found those answers within himself. He talked about how in the outside world, we far too often depend on ego energy to keep us going. Whereas when we go within, we enter a silence that shatters that ego. One in which we leave ourselves open to hear the divine within. If you were to walk into this room and I'm trying to speak while everybody else is speaking, you're not likely going to hear it. But when it's silent and we only have one person speaking, you're likely going to hear it, right? So another thing I want to mention that Palmer refers to as far as moving forward is something he calls the circle of trust. Now, he circles back around to our need to unplug. And he says, we need safe spaces, silent and solitary spaces where we can get the news from within. But when it comes to forming the habits of the heart that make a democracy work, solitude has its limits. We also need safe spaces for small gatherings of the company of strangers, spaces where citizens can come together to explore the challenge of living heartfelt lives in the neighborhood, in the workplace, and in the larger world. So one thing we teach here at Unity, and probably a lot of New Thought churches teach, that we have the freedom to choose what we do within our lives here on earth. We have the freedom to choose our thoughts, the freedom to choose how we feel, and the freedom to create our own perceptions. Now, within that freedom to choose, we also choose to live our lives in our own cocoon without any outer influence if we wish. That's our choice, to just kind of wrap ourselves up and just live kind of a life of solitude. Within that, though, life can sometimes get really bland. There's no variety when we're just in that little blanket of solitude all the time. And we probably really won't learn or grow too much if we continue to do that. There's a place for it, but just not all the time. But take it outside of that little cocoon, and we're likely to be exposed to so much more in this experience here on earth. Different places, and most importantly, different types of people, and what all of our uniqueness in this human experience entails. Now, I'm a person, I love to read. From as long as I can remember, there is not a time where I'm not involved in a book. And I love to read for both entertainment and to learn, so I do it for both. And it's not just books. I like to read articles, I like to read blogs, just anything I can get my hands on typically that's of interest. But I also believe that we learn through experiences. For instance, I can read about escargot all that I want. But unless I actually get out and try it, I'm not likely to get the benefit of this full experience. And just to let everybody know, I have never tried snails, nor do I plan on it. Which is probably why I don't know what they taste like. Okay, so anyway. But please don't stop reading. If you're a reader, continue to read. But also to remember to seek out those places where you can both have and share experiences with other people. It is so very important for our spiritual growth for us to do that. Especially those places in where we can begin to create those circles of trust, right? Probably as many of you did in your private study groups. Many of us may have entered these groups as strangers, but by now we've created a circle of trust and a group of friends. Now, I've been involved in a group called the Mankind Project. And what that is, I'm not going to advertise it, but it offers a safe space for men to share and to learn to build trust with one another. And one of the first things I learned about within that group is the importance of creating and maintaining what we call the container. Now, that container is both a safe and a sacred place to share and to build trust, but it's often also a place where we can learn and to find out that we really aren't necessarily that different after all. It may come in different forms and different flavors, but in the end, one of those things we so often learn is that our desires and our dreams really don't differ that much from each other. We find that most of us want to love and to be loved. Most of us just want to feel safe. Now, Palmer also talks about a circle that he wants facilitated for physicians. And he said that one man would attend, and Palmer said that he sensed the man was especially burdened, was the term he used. He would sense that this man was especially burdened. And he could tell that this man had something to say, yet he also felt that this man needed some time to be able to build up trust within the group that he was with. The trust that he perhaps needed to really let everyone know what that burden was that he was carrying around. And he didn't speak for a while. But Palmer said he noticed, and the rest of the group noticed, that the man he really seemed to follow and listen to what was being said in the group. He was participating, just not speaking. And Palmer and the group just simply allowed this man to be, figuring that he would speak when he felt ready, and if he felt ready to do so. And that's exactly what happened. One day, Palmer talks about how he led the group into meditation, settling them into a time of silence. And he also invited them to speak the truth from themselves rather in response to what someone else in the group said. Now, as we know, to do this takes trust. When we begin to speak, not in response to what someone else says, but from something that's within ourselves, it takes trust because you're really putting yourself out there. And I've struggled with this some in my own life. I'll be sitting in a group of people and I felt like I have something to say, something that's on my mind. So I listen for a bit and almost kind of hoping that somebody else will bring it up first. Or that somebody else will say something similar. Because when that happens, it makes you feel that less alone. Then you can say, oh yeah, I was just thinking about that. Yet the conversation goes on and nobody mentions it. And I've had this happen in work meetings and all types of places. But then you find out when nobody else says it that you're left with one of two choices. You can keep quiet and you can continue to carry it with you on your mind when you leave that day thinking, oh, I should have said it. Or you can completely make yourself vulnerable and just come out with it. Sometimes you'll feel so much better just come out with it. And you may find that you aren't so alone. Maybe somebody else was sitting there hoping somebody else would do it, and you've given them the pathway. And it's always great to be able to do that within a circle of trust. People that you trust enough to know that they're not going to give you any kind of judgment and are going to openly accept it, even if nobody else in the group is feeling that way. Having those spaces where we can create trust can offer those things for us and so much more. Palmer mentions a few conditions within the circle of trust that I felt were worth mentioning, and if you want to look them up in your book, they're on page 160. But he mentioned these safe spaces and these circles of trust, and he stated that everything we offer during a retreat is an invitation, or in these circles, not an assignment to which people may respond however they wish. We prohibit any attempts to fix, advise, save, or correct others within these circles of trust. And this frees people to be able to speak and to listen openly to one another. And we also, when we create these circles of trust, we trust the silence, and we allow it to underlie and infuse our dialogues. Now, Palmer also mentions the power of these circles of trust. He starts out talking about the power of the circle by going back to that physician who found his voice in the group. He says, had it not been for the group he sat with, or that circle of trust, this physician might not have ever spoken his truth even to himself. Now, Palmer goes on to mention, and this will be in 162 on your book if you want to read it, if I can find it. I put the stickies in there to help me, and well, I got sticky fingers. But Palmer states, however, when we are in a safe space, exploring our dilemmas with others, and listening to them explore theirs, our internal conversations are freshened and sharpened, and are more likely to become more truthful and more fruitful. When we speak our truth in community, it becomes harder to forget or deny that we said it, and harder not to pursue its implications. So I believe that part of that means that our circles of trust can also force us to take action. Because once I've said something, it's out there. I'll say something and be like, oh no, I really put that out there. Now I can't just carry it around with me. These people are going to expect me to get out and act on it. And this might be a good time to stand back and take a look at what is really mine to do. Like what it is that's really ours to do. Now, according to the National Science Foundation, the average person has about 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Now, some of those thoughts are just thoughts, right? They're just those things that are kind of swirling around out there, and they're just going to come and go and kind of flit through your consciousness and your mind. But what about those thoughts that are spirit-led? What about those that are calling us to do more or to share our gifts with others? To make that positive change to our communities, maybe offering something that our communities so desperately need, or even that maybe just one other person so desperately needs. Now, there are some of those thoughts that just will not allow you to let them go. They just keep coming back around no matter how hard you try to shove it in a box, say, I'm not going to do that, they keep coming back. And I had felt that way for my call to becoming a minister. And it was a thought that I held within me for a very long time. I grew up in a traditional church, and I was like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. I can't teach those teachings. But it was something that just kept coming back over and over. I'd walk into churches, and I would just feel this feeling in my gut like that's where I was meant to be and what I was supposed to do. And I didn't voice this to anybody for a very long time. It took the right time and place. But I felt that I'd be judged in various ways about telling people that I wanted to become a minister. So I just kept it to myself. And I also doubted myself with it. I'd sit down and look at myself and be like, who am I to be a minister? I felt like I was far from perfect and, quite truthfully, very introverted and oftentimes very shy still. How could I possibly minister to those in need? But that thought never went away. And I finally found the courage to begin to voice this to other people. But I started doing that within my circles of trust because I knew I could do so without judgment. And I knew those thoughts, whether they went anywhere or not, would be welcomed. And I'm glad I did, because it's within those circles I began to find encouragement. And I began to find the courage to become something I had only ever dreamed of doing up to that point. Now, yours may be to take some kind of action to help others, to take a class of some kind, or to simply just voice whatever it is within your circles and just to get it out there to somebody else. Maybe it's meant for somebody else to hear it and to find their own courage. You just never really know, especially if you don't voice it. Nobody else is ever going to know if you don't voice it. Now, going back to the physician that found his voice in his own circle, he discovered that he wasn't alone. Palmer states, when we learn that we are surrounded by kindred souls, we begin to gather the imagination, the courage, and the collective power necessary to work for institutional transformation. And what about spiritual transformation? Y'all know by now I like to put the word spiritual on the front. What about spiritual transformation? Think kindred souls within our own circles might be able to help us as well? Now, one other thing I wanted to address is what Palmer refers to as cyberspace and deep democracy. Now, I want to talk about that and how it can help our forward momentum as we move forward from this point. Now, as we know, we can find anything, and I mean anything, even some things we don't want to find, at our fingertips. We can do it on our phones, on our computers, and now even our watches, and who knows what else is in development. But it's everywhere. And many, and I've taught before, where we sometimes miss, I can't believe I'm saying this now, but the good old days. But we've talked about how we both just really loved those times in college where you get ready to write a research paper and you physically go to the library to do your research. You'd have to actually go through books and articles and sometimes even pull up that dreaded microfiche machine. I guess they're still there, I don't know. But it took some time to really write a research paper, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. But nowadays, you just pull up Google, you type in what you look for, and boom, it's right there on the page. Probably a lot more articles than what you cared to ever find. But there's, of course, a lot of extra fact-checking that is required now, but it's all right there in front of you. Thousands of pages. And one of the things I look back on and wonder before technology, I'm like with directions. I vaguely remember as a teenager, I'd pick up the phone and be like, I want to go to this restaurant. So you pick up the phone and be like, where are you? How do you get there? It had to annoy the heck out of those people that worked in these places. But now I cannot imagine surviving without my GPS. So anyway, that's been the piece of technology that I really enjoy. But I digress. It is wonderful having this technology at our fingertips, but it also comes with a really great responsibility, right? And I just mentioned fact-checking a little while ago, and last week I see this coupon going around online, and it's like 75% off at like this major store. My mom has shared it and this and that, but I'm looking at it, and I click on it, and I see it doesn't lead you to that store at all. It's instead something asking for your information, your name and email address, and you're just going to get blasted with all this crazy stuff. But we've got to be careful with what we share, right? Especially before conducting our own research of the facts. We also have the choice as to how we use the internet. Do we use it to spread love and joy? Or do we use it to spread anger? Now, Palmer mentioned the student sit-ins that took place in the 1960s. And he talked about the first one taking place at the Greensboro, North Carolina, Woolsworth, if I can say that, lunch counter on February 1st of that year. And these sit-ins spread like wildfire throughout that month. They went all the way down to Texas and a lot of other places. And this was the days before the internet. Imagine the power we have now that we have the internet. Now, Palmer states, because the internet allows us to connect with people at great geographic and experiential remove, we have a chance to expand and deepen our sense of sharing a common life. And to me, that's what it really all boils down to. Our sense of sharing a common life. Even though that sense of sharing that common life may be expressed in different ways and through different experiences. So what are some of the ways in which Palmer states that we can use the internet? And again, this is on page 172 of your book. But he mentions we can use it as an understanding that we are all in this together. An appreciation of the value of otherness. The ability to hold tension in life-giving ways. A sense of personal voice and agency. And a greater capacity to create community. That sounds far different than using it to spread anger, doesn't it? Now, throughout this book study, I feel that we've gained some forward momentum. Not only as to how we strengthen and deepen just American democracy, but spiritual democracy as well. How can we begin to see beyond those blurry lines of those things that make us separate? I feel that this has helped us do that. I feel it's helped us as to how we can use conversation to make us realize that we all bleed the same blood. We all so often have the same hopes and dreams and desires. And how when it all boils down, how we really all just want to feel safe and to be loved. And it's up to us. Mentioned earlier, we have choices. And the choice is always ours to make. I make the choice as to whether or not I look into the eyes of someone from a different country and see my brother or sister. I make the choice to look beyond the different languages that we speak. I make the choice to love someone, whether that person identifies as Christian, as Jew, as Muslim, as Hindu, as atheist, or anything else that's out there. I make that choice. I choose to do my part in the heart of democracy. And I choose to do my part to heal and to practice spiritual democracy, even sometimes when it seems hard to do. And I choose to do that through my words and my thoughts and my actions. And what about you all? Will you make that choice to do that with me today? Namaste.